What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back for yet another album review for you guys, and this time, talking about another big album in death metal that came out on Friday the 13th of May, and that is, of course, the latest offering from Kenosha, Wisconsin death metal band Jungle Rot and their album A Call to Arms. So, brief little history lesson for Jungle Rot is that they formed back in 1992 out of Kenosha, Wisconsin, and have been pretty much a mainstay in death metal really ever since they first came about 30 years ago, and have been one of the more consistent modern death metal bands that have been going since the late 90s. However, I will thoroughly admit, full disclosure, I never listened to Jungle Rot until today, and I don't know why. It's just, I've listened to an absurd amount of music and an absurd amount of death metal, but for some reason, Jungle Rot has always just flown under the radar to me. I mean, I definitely knew who they were, and I've heard a couple of things from them here and there, but in terms of, like, diving head-on into the deep end of their music, never really did until this new album. So, for my first full length I've heard from Jungle Rot, how does it hold up? Well, let's take a look. So we kick things off with the title track, A Call to Arms. There's a smooth build-up in the beginning as the guitars are chunky with slight tremolos going on. Following that, the verses have some hardcore bite to them through the grooves and some of the D beats coming in, and that groove even stays through the choruses. And we do get two odd yet cool leads here, but the problem was they were just too short and just didn't really build off of them very much. So I thought that was kind of disappointing, but the song as a whole was a solid song to get us started. Then we get into Beyond the Grave, starting off with some strange melodic play here, but the riff that's following along was just kind of boring to me. And the verses have some energy to them, but it doesn't really go into the next gear until a tremolo riff comes in out of nowhere, it seems. And then that bland riff comes back in the chorus, and a cool, mysterious lead comes in towards the end just to add a little bit of something to this song, because, yeah, this song, it just felt like they were stuck in second gear and didn't go into third throughout much. Genocidal Imperium kind of does a similar thing, although there's a little more energy to it. Like, the riff that begins is very energetic and very thrashy, kind of almost similar to Blood Red Throne a little bit. The verses stay really thrashy and brings in some gang vocals, and the choruses do bring back a little bit of that hardcore groove, and the bridge has some cool melodic atmosphere going on, but not much else, and the song doesn't really end on a positive note for me. Asymmetric Warfare starts off with some classic metal vibes, but the riff didn't really deliver on that vibe. The verses, again, similar to Beyond the Grave, just kind of stay in second gear, don't really go much of anywhere. The choruses do break up that riff more by adding more groove to it, which helped a little bit, and little melodies can be heard here and there, but that was about all I could say about this track. But then we finally get into another solid one, and that's Vengeance and Bloodlust. Thick and fun riff to get us going here at the start of this track. Then some ferocious fury is unleashed with some thrashy intensity all throughout the verses and the pre-chorus to give the song more bite. The bridge brings back that beginning riff to build up towards the chaotic lead that feels very much like Slayer. Like, it's mostly about squealy dive bombs just to feel chaotic and just wild. And it works for this song, whereas other times, whenever I'm hearing them squealy dive bombs, didn't really work out much for me. Now we get into the most weird, or the strangest song of the album for me, and that's Maggot Infested. While I do like the riff that starts the song off, and there's little cool pinch harmonics going on, then the riff changes, and call me crazy if you want, but it almost felt a little dance-friendly. Like, I almost wanted to, like, dance to this riff, which was weird, but not saying it was bad. It was just, it just felt weird. It's like, you're not supposed to dance to death metal unless you're in a mosh pit, but this just felt like it could have been in like a dance club or something. Again, call me crazy if you want, that's what I heard. The verses stay in more of a classic metal groove, while the chorus brings back that dance riff again. Some cool drum fills following the bridge before that dance riff comes back towards the end to bring the song to a close. Yeah, definitely the weirdest song, and it was okay for what it was, but it's just like, I could have danced to this song. It's like, what? I don't know what to make of it. But then we get into some really good ones here coming up next. So we get Death Squad. Furious brought back here at the beginning of this song as the riff is intense and feral, leading into more cool riffs coming along. The verses brings in some more tremolo work to add more chaos. The choruses bring a little bit of a bolt thrower influence in there too. The lead section we get here, this is the prime example of why squealy dive bomb leads don't always work, because this one was very disappointing. Wasn't a big fan of it. But then afterwards, we got a much better lead to bring the song to a close that had more melody and more feel to it. Haunting Future, a sweet groove and riff to go along with that groove to get us going here. The verses bring in a little bit more of an obituary influence with how the riffs are in between groove and thrash. And then the choruses keep that flavor going, but mix it in some of the bolt thrower spices to add more to that flavor. Again, another squealy lead just to be there before we get another cool proper lead with a little bit of like a classic metal flair to it. Total Extinction was, well, granted, the shortest song of the album at about 2 minutes 20 seconds, but it starts off with this big scream and tremolo riff with crazy blast beats and a nice melodic lead to start us off in a big way. And then the verses and the choruses brings in more syncopated grooves similar to Decapitated, which I really, really like how they brought that into this track. And while it was a short song, it packed a lot of bite and punch to it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then the final track, which was the best track of the album, Population Suicide. Big build-up to begin as the guitars and the drums carry us into one of the best riffs of the album. The verses showcase that riff changing by adding more life to it, like tremolos and little hints of melody. The choruses get thrashy, while the riff is still sticking a little bit more with tremolos, and gang vocals come back. The bridge gets into a nice groove that almost feels like Pantera a little bit, and the riff that's accompanying that groove is quite catchy. And then we end off with some epic tremolos to build atmosphere towards the end. And that's how we end this thing. So overall, this album is another proper definition of a tale of two halves. Like, the first half, it started off really sweet with the title track, and then it just kind of dipped and kind of stayed in this one little line, maybe dip a little bit more. And then with Vengeance and Bloodlust, it rose a little bit. And then it dips a tad with Maggot Infested, but the final 4 songs definitely helped save this album from being lackluster, in my opinion. Because really, honestly, you could have just shortened this into an EP with just the title track, Vengeance and Bloodlust, and the final 4 songs. And I think this would be a hell of an EP, but the other tracks just didn't really go much of anywhere. Plus, a lot of the riffs on this album kind of sounded the same all throughout. While granted, the production on this album is really, really good. It was mixed and mastered by my idol, Dan Swano, so that had some help there in terms of the sonics of the album. But in terms of the execution of the music, like 6 out of the 10 songs were really were anything special, and then the other 4 were just weird to just there. And that sucks, because I was hoping this album would have been killer, because this is my first experience fully head-on into Jungle Rot. I was expecting some awesomeness here, and you got little hints of it here and there with a few tracks, but as a whole, wasn't the biggest fan of this one, and for those reasons, I'm actually going to give this album a 6.5 out of 10. It has its moments. Like I said, the title track, Vengeance and Bloodlust, and the final 4 tracks save this album from being an average, run-of-the-mill, lackluster album. It's an okay album at best, but it just kind of felt paint by numbers for the most part, and that sucks because Jungle Rod have been, despite my lack of experience with listening to them, knowing about who they are and what they've been able to do, they've been flying the flag a little bit for death metal, even during a period where death metal was kind of seen as obscure, which is still very hyperbolic to say. But yeah, this album just didn't really grab me as much. Granted, it's a very short album. It's 33 minutes and change. So it doesn't feel... So the one positive, or the one other positive thing I'll say about this album, it doesn't feel like it drags on, which is good, because it's just short, sweet, well, kind of sweet and to the point, but you get where I'm coming from. It doesn't drag, so it doesn't feel like it's taking forever to get to the end of this album. Don't necessarily hate this album. There are some moments on here. It's okay, but I was expecting more, and that's all I can say about it. But what did you guys think of A Call to Arms by Jungle Rod? Let me know in the comments section below, and until next time, horns high. See you soon. At number 30, we have Dream Theater's A View from the Top of the World. Yeah, this is probably, in my opinion, the best Dream Theater album since Octavarium, and that was 16 years ago when that album came out. I think it's that good. Like, it's also more riff-oriented for me than most Dream Theater albums as of late. I thought this was a little bit better than Distance Over Time, way better than the Astonishing. Hell, if there's an album in my collection I would sell first, it would be The Astonishing. I did buy it when it came out, and yeah, I haven't gone back to it really at all since, except for one song, Heaven's Cove. But that's The Astonishing.